Hey there! Thanks for tuning in to The View from Monkey's Eyebrow. We are broadcasting out of Joe's Place in Monkey's Eyebrow, located in Ballard County, Kentucky. We'll be talking with the folks who live in Ballard County. They are some of the most fascinating characters, and will share some of the most interesting stories you'll ever hear. By the time they're done, you might even want to live here. Your host is Joe Culver.
Dusty De Baun is a good friend of my son, Joe Ray Culver. That's how I met him. One year, Dusty and Joe Ray collected several 5-gallon buckets of pecans from under my pecan tree. That was the last year that kind of harvest happened. Either the tree isn't bearing as well or the squirrels and the crows are beating me to the nuts. I'd known Dusty for a while before I heard him pick a guitar. His picking blew me away, but I blew back, and here we are. Good morning, Dusty.
Good morning.
Dusty, I don't believe you're a Ballard County native. Is that right?
That's correct.
What
yes.
do you consider to be your hometown?
Well, I guess it would be Clovis, New Mexico, where I was born and raised there, and until Dad and my mother finally moved to Kentucky in 1968.
I know the name Clovis because that's the town where they first found what they call the Clovis Paleo-Indian projectile points. Are you familiar with those?
Yes, sir.
When I worked at the ancient buried city, every once in a while a trader would come by to sell or trade flint or potteries and stuff, and those particular points were the most expensive of all of them. They're 12,800 years to 35,000 years old.
Wow.
That's older than either one of us.
Right. Yeah, quite a bit.
What brought you to Ballard County?
My dad had people back here. He was born and raised in Dorena, Missouri, so whenever work got scarce out there, he looked for work elsewhere. And most people back in them days, they would rely on their family to try to help them find work, and even stay with them for a while till they found work. So that's what he did. He came here in '68 to go to work.
So how old did that make you?
I was 11 at that time.
So you went to school in Ballard County, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Grade school.
Yeah, I went to their Barlow School and then went out to the high school at Ballard.
Is your wife Joanna a native Ballard Countyan?
Yes.
Where
Well, actually, she's from McCracken County there on McHenry Church Road where she was raised at. So that's just the edge of McCracken County
Right.
there. So that's where, but she's got a Keble address where she lived at.
And now you live on I guess it's a Barlow address, but not right in downtown Barlow.
No, we live out in the country, but we do live in Barlow, yes.
Over the course of the years, Dusty, what kinds of work have you done?
Mainly welding and ironworking. Since of my size, I could get around pretty quick, so I took to connecting. So that, and also it paid more. Back then they had a hazardous pay. The higher you went, the more you got paid. So I was after as much money as I could because I was bringing children into this world at that time.
How high did you get?
I've been up as high as 640 feet.
Let's see. How many stories is that? Was it a building or a bridge or what?
No, it's building, and yeah, it's a building.
What is it? 40 stories or?
Well, I never really thought about how many stories it was, and I might have been told over the years and just forgot. But
pretty much a skyscraper, though,
yeah, just
what I
about.
would consider it.
Yeah.
And you were doing ironwork at that time.
Yes.
Did you get scared looking down?
No, not really. I noticed everybody on the ground looked like little ants and walking around, but and there was times whenever we would have a rain out, and they would call up on the radios for us to come down, and it wasn't raining where we was at, but it was raining down there where they were at. So,
for the same building?
Same building.
So you were above the rain.
Above the rain. The rain come in real close off the river, and It'd rain, and big heavy clouds. And it'd be a rain out. We'd be up there just as dry. But when we got on the elevator and headed down, we got wet going to the parking lot.
Goodness, I never heard of
Yeah.
that. Did you have to tie yourself onto the girders? I guess you call it girders you're working on.
You did whenever you was, bullpen in a hole up to make a bolt go in. You would have to, but that's what the bolt up hands would do. But connectors, we never tied off because you didn't have nothing to tie off to, and our spuds and spud wrenches that we carried on us, that's what we stood on. We stick them in a hole and stand on them. And just hold on, because when they flew the steel in, you had to be able to duck in case they were coming in too hot, and it could hit the steel and bounce, and then if it bounced, it being up there shaking, you better hang on. But we didn't tie off because it wasn't mandatory for the connectors to tie off.
I don't know that I would go that high to work, but you talk about hanging on. I would hang on with both hands and both legs. I couldn't get much work done like that.
Well, we had to, of course, those pieces didn't come in real fast all the time, but they would send in what they call a tree, and the tree would probably have anywhere from 10 to 7 pieces on it, and they put it up backwards in reverse, like you build your house from the ground up. These pieces had to come in backwards, so the lay-down crew in the yard and the boomers would connect everything backwards, so we could hang it. Then the top piece would actually be the top. The last piece would be the top piece, and that's how we would do it. But we just stuck our spuds in the hole and hung on, or stepped on them and held on with the other hand, and caught the steel with your other hand when it come in.
Well, I'm glad you didn't keep doing that. What did you go to next?
Welding. When I was 36 years old, down in Alabama, I was working a job there, and I'd been with this company about 6 years. I got up that morning and went to work just like always, in full dress, ready to go out and hang steel. And I didn't know that my boss was down at the print table, was watching me, so he seen me take 3 steps out on the iron and stop. And I took 3 steps back, leaned up against the column. And the second time I'd done it, my radio went off. And he said, I need you down here to look at something on the prints I forgot to show you, which he didn't. There was nothing to that. He was wanting me to come down as safely as possible. So I turned around and went to this ladder, and I wasn't too far off the ground. I wasn't maybe 45, 50 feet off the ground. So I started down. When I got to the print table, he said, "What in the world was that?" I said, "What?" He said, "I saw you up there. Stopped twice." He said, "Did you go out and get drunk last night?" I said, "No, sir. I was at your house eating steaks, remember? I stayed at your place." He goes, "That's right, we did." He said, "How old are you?" I said, 36. He said, "You'll never hang another piece of iron for me." He said, "I don't have nobody over 30 hang steel for me." He said, "You went further than any man I've ever let go." And I didn't realize that your equilibrium changes, and between 30 and 36 is a real major area that they really concerned with. They watch you real close, and most time you don't make it past 36. And I had made it to him, according to him, further than any man he had hang steel for him.
So you either lost your nerve or your balance?
Your balance, it wasn't my nerve, because I still went up, but I went up in a safer way. I would ride a man basket up on a crane. They'd put me, I'd get out on the iron, I was already there, and I'd walk over to a designated area that they had roped off for me to refabricate, because the engineers didn't do it right. And I had to cut it and weld it and cut and drill new holes. Then the bolt-up hands could come in and put what was supposed to go there. It might even be a stair landing for a set of stairs to go up to the next floor, but it was not fabricated right. And I would go up there, and that's what I did. I changed until I got, I guess I quit ironworking when I turned about 54.
I know you've done some farming.
Yeah, I did that on the side because I'd retired ironworking, and I got tired of sitting at the house. So I decided I'd help somebody else.
Yes, yeah, I mentioned in the introduction about you and Joe Ray getting pecans. Do you happen to remember how many buckets full you got that year?
If I hadn't had the pictures back then to prove it, that nobody would have believed me. And I sent them pictures of 15 5-gallon buckets, and I said that's not all because two of them went inside to Mr. C.
Yeah, that's a lot of pecans.
That's a
I
lot.
haven't gotten more than a handful any year since then.
Right, and that was a bumper crop that year.
Well, I've had them like that before, and I don't know if it's the squirrels or the birds, but something, they're either not falling or something's getting to them quicker than I can.
Right.
Also mentioned about you playing guitar. What got you started playing guitar?
Well, I was interested in it because my dad played, and my dad of course he played in little honky tonks and things like that all the time I was growing up. Because he worked, of course, cutting timber with the dozers. But I got interested in it. As a matter of fact, all my brothers all followed suit in playing instruments, and he bought me one when I was when we first moved here in '68. He bought me one that Christmas, and I started. But his way of teaching was kind of odd. Most people wouldn't do it this way, but he'd show you a chord, and he said, "Now go to your room, and when you practice that till you can do it and do it right, make it sound right without buzzing the strings." He said, "And I'll show you another one," and that's how it went until I was able to play. I guess he wanted to listen to the news and didn't want to hear me try to practice. That's what I thought it was, but that's how I started.
Well, learning chords doesn't really explain how you do your thumb and finger picking. How did you learn that?
Well, I really paid attention to Chet Atkins and Grady Martin, people like that. Earl Clerk was a black man that plays mainly with his thumb, and was really, really good on the guitar. A lot of people don't remember him, but he played a lot with Chet Atkins. But that's a style that I liked, and because that's a style I could play by myself and entertain my own self. Now, just to sit down and play three chords and then turn around and play three more chords, that's not too much entertaining unless you're somebody singing. Then you can play for them. Then the entertainment comes full circle. But to do it by yourself, it doesn't come full circle. So that's why I learned that style, just so I could satisfy myself.
Do you play any other instruments?
Bass guitar and various other stringed instruments I've played. I play a little bit on the piano and things like that, but banjo. My grandmother got me started playing the banjo because I got aggravated at her, and I loved her to pieces. But every day when I get off the school bus and come home, my guitar would be tuned to a banjo. And then when everybody else got off the school bus and come home, we all sat and played before supper time. It was just one of the things we did every evening. And where most kids go out and play baseball, we sat in and played guitars. Well, I'd have to retune my guitar every day. And finally, one time over the weekend, I said, of course, everybody was gone, it's just me and her, and all them guitars in there tuned up to a guitar. And I said, "Here you are, Grandma." And I handed that guitar, I said, "Tune it to a banjo and teach me how to play it." And it was a lot simpler than I thought, but since then I can tune one to the banjo, and then I can tune it back to the guitar and play.
You talked about playing chords with someone singing. Have you played for singers?
Well, other than just people around here and churches, people like that I've played for. And of course, whenever Dad was in the bands, whoever they had singing, of course I was young, I didn't really know them. They might have been popular, they might not have, but they had a good voice. But he'd get me to play because there was my dad didn't know too many chords, but for some reason in that area, I kind of blossomed a little bit further than he did, and he and I would play. He told me when I turned 15 years old, he said, "You play better now than I ever played," and of course that's why. But I drilled on it every day at that time.
So you played with some bands with your dad.
Yeah.
Have you played in other bands?
Yes, sir. In Paducah, whenever a lot of people knew me because I had a band back then. If somebody wanted to go outside, or if they had to leave early, they knew me in the crowd. They'd ask me to come up and sit in, and I would sit in for people.
What was your band's name?
Southern Pride.
What?
Southern Pride.
Southern Pride. All right. Now, I'm pretty sure I heard you or someone say that you got to play at the Grand Ole Opry. Is that right?
Well, I was guest on the Grand Ole Opry twice. I didn't get to play, but I got to meet all the people in the back in there. But I thought I was going to get to play, but I didn't. But I did, however, get to be a guest on there twice.
How do you get to be a guest on the Opry?
Well, I got lucky one year. Went to Nashville with my father-in-law to buy clothes. He, like you, he worked at a desk job in most all his life, and he dressed accordingly. It was nice clothes, and he just liked to buy his clothes in Nashville. So we went, and it was wintertime when we went down there. And it just so happened that it had snowed about 5 or 6 inches, and it was still coming down when we was in the motel room. And I heard somebody outside spinning and back and forth spinning, and they wasn't going anywhere. So I opened the door, looked out, and I told my father-in-law, I said, that man over there is stuck. I'm going to go out there and push him. He was in the parking lot. That's how thick the snow was. So I go out there and help push him and got him to where his car would go. And he gets out and he has this red uniform, or it looked like it's a costume is what it was. A red jacket, shirt, white tie, red pants with these little balls hanging off the bottom of them, and prettiest pair of cowboy boots you ever saw. And he told me who he was. He was a steel guitar player for Hank Snow. And I said, well, I'm pleased to meet you. He said, what do I owe you? I said, you don't. Just return the favor. And he said, would you like to go to Grand Ole Opry? And I said, well, yeah, I believe everybody would. He said, he wrote his name down and wrote down the name of the man at the gate. He said, and you give this man this piece of paper. And I said, when do I do that? He said, tonight, 9 o'clock tonight, be there. And so I took it inside and I told my father-in-law, I said, what do you think about that? He said, well, we ain't doing anything. He's either lied to us or he's telling the truth. We can go see. So we went down there and the man wasn't lying. He was telling the truth. So, but he's the one that let me in. That's who I got to go in with. Or because I was his guest, I got to get on the Grand Ole Opry. And the next following year, I went down and told him the same thing, and I went right on in.
So, backstage or?
Yeah, backstage. Yeah. Backstage. And I could sit right to the corner beside the stage. All the people was out in the auditorium. But I sat over close to where the next act was getting ready to come on stage. That's where I stood.
Who were some of the stars at that time?
Hank Snow was there. Charlie Pride was there. Dolly Parton was some of the women I met. And they was some of the nicest people backstage. Mm-hmm. They was entirely different than what you would think when they was on stage. But one of the friendliest men I ever met was Charlie Pride. I mean, he was the type of man that went out of his way to show you kindness, and I really appreciated him.
And he could sing pretty well.
Yes, sir. He sure could. Yeah.
You mentioned churches. Any particular church? Several churches?
Well, we played in just any church that would call us back in the day when we had a gospel band. It was back then. It was called the De Baun Brothers. All my brothers played with me, plus a few others. But we played everywhere, and it didn't matter what religion the church was. If it was Pentecost, Presbyterian, Baptist, or Catholic, it didn't matter. If they wanted us to play, we played. And they was evidently some of them had been to some of the places we had played and heard us, and wanted us there. That's how they got around. It wasn't just, well, here's a band, we'll just call them. But they knew what to expect from me whenever I got there.
I don't think you're a guitar maker, but I think you've kind of built some guitars.
Yes, with the help of John Parrish from Paducah, Kentucky. He was the main teacher, but I just assisted and helped build several guitars. As a matter of fact, the old guitar I've got now is a 1963 Echo, and the all the guts was completely gone when I got it. I got it in the case, just the piece, the body and the neck's all I got. And I had it for several years before I went to a yard sale and I seen this neck of a guitar sticking up out of a box. And John said, "Well, you see that?" And I said, "Yes." We stopped, got out, went up there, and this lady had that guitar for sale, and it was a 1965 Stratocaster. But she had already run over it many times and broke it half in two. And her husband come to the door, and she immediately sent him back into the house, sold me the guitar for $25. All I wanted, all I could save out of it was the guts, in which I put in this guitar, and I've had it for 41 years. I've been playing it.
How do you run over a guitar?
With a car. She laid it down in the concrete out there because I seen where her she lived right there because it was summertime and she had these picnic tables set up and selling stuff, and we went around yard selling and she run over it right there on the concrete with her car, broke it. Many times she run over it.
Oh my goodness! Are you still active in the Wycliffe Masonic Lodge?
Yes, sir.
Now, I don't remember if it was the year before COVID, but right in that vicinity, you were I don't know what you call the top guy, Grand Master or Poobah.
I was a master of the lodge then.
Wasn't that about the year before COVID?
It was 2017 is when I was a master.
Gosh, it doesn't seem like it's been that long.
I know, it's been a while. Yeah.
The lodge doesn't have its Saturday breakfast anymore, does it?
Not since the COVID happened. There was a lot of the people that actually helped in doing the breakfast was the elderly group in our lodge, and a lot of them got sick and had a lot of problems, and so it just didn't pan out to where we had enough younger people that could get off work and come and help us. Most of them are pretty well tied to their jobs,
right.
And most of it was done by retired people anyway, and so it affected our lodge, pretty good. So.
I used to go every first Saturday of the month with my Uncle Billy Bob, and I really enjoyed the breakfast. And I thought at the time that the lodge really was active and did a lot of good around the community.
Well, we do. We try to do as much as we can.
What sorts of things do you do?
Well, for instance, for the Christmas this year, just like any other year we've done in the past, since I've started, they'll buy. I forget how many we got last year, but when I was master of the lodge, I remember we bought 3 girls' bicycles and 3 boys' bicycles, and it was set up based on their grades and how hard what they did in school and how things was. So it wasn't like you stuck your hand in there and pulled out a name. The children had a goal to work for and toward, and they was rewarded, things like that. Plus we have the groceries that we give away for Thanksgiving and Christmas that we do every year.
I believe that the lodge was kind of in charge of the Harvest Festival until the city took it over a few years back.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, a lot of things have changed here lately.
Yeah, they have. Some for the better and some maybe not for the better. Now, you're retired or semi-retired. What do you do to stay busy these days?
Right now, I just run around welding for people at way cheaper than I used to but I don't stay busy every day. I work as much as I want, but there's a lot of people that can't afford a welder from town to come out with a service truck and because usually they'll have so much for the call out there and so much an hour, and then plus materials.
Yeah.
And I don't do that anymore. I mean, years ago when I had a family, that was probably been all right, but I don't. When someone needs me, and I go out there, if they've got to look around, we find something that'll make it work, I'll fix it for them, and I don't charge them much, just whatever they can afford. But I just like getting out, and if I'm not doing that, I'm probably fishing.
Do you still raise chickens?
Yes, sir. Yeah, still do that. And,
Eagles?
No, there's several hawks that live around. They're glad I've got chickens, but But yeah, I still got them, and I don't sell the eggs. I give them away.
You mentioned fishing again. I think mostly you fish for bass and catfish.
Yes,
What's the biggest fish you ever caught?
oh my goodness. I guess probably for myself, probably the biggest bass I ever caught was 12 pounds,
Oh,
and he was huge. And Gerald Wells told me that the pond I was fishing in was his. He said, "There's no fish in that pond, Dusty." And I said, "Well,
that bass ate them all.
I guess," but he was huge, and I caught him in February, real cold, and so he didn't bite very hard. I thought, well, I kind of hung up, but when he got to the top and rolled over, I seen, man, this is a fish. So my brother helped me get him in, and Gerald Wells, he said, "I'd like to see that." So I paddled over where he was at, to show him what he had in his pond. He didn't know it.
Yeah.
But the biggest other fish other than that would be probably a catfish about 15 pounds out of the river. Now, your son, Joe Ray, he's caught a lot larger fish than I have. But
Do you and Joe Ray still fish? Or?
yes, sir, when we can. We haven't in the last year or so since he took that job up there where he's working at the window place. We haven't had a chance to go. But he goes fishing with somebody there close that goes down by Clark's River because he's up there close to Clark's River. He's practically on it, really, where Joe Ray lives.
Is that the guy he calls cousin or
Country?
country?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and Joe Ray fish for catfish in the river mostly. don't
Mostly,
you?
yes, sir.
So,
And bass, when we hit the ponds and stuff, we go for bass fishing.
okay. Uh, I always ask people this: you've got any good, interesting, or funny stories you could share with us?
Well, I don't know for sure. The story I thought of this morning when I knew I was coming to visit with you is one whenever I was in 68 when we came here from Clovis, New Mexico. My parents, for some reason, I don't know, because kids don't know what goes on behind things, but they separated, and it was just a matter of a couple of months or so. The man that my mother was seeing, I didn't care for, and I knew what I knew in my heart was that I could only see that it was wrong. Why is that man here? So I guess I was reluctant to try to get along with him. So my dad took me, and I lived with him, and he raised me by himself from then on up till I got married. But when he would stay gone for a month at a time. He would come home the first of every month, and he would pay the rent, the electric, and the water bill there in Barlow, and he'd buy a bill of groceries that he thought in his heart that it should last a whole month. But me being a young boy, I could eat the groceries up a lot faster than Dad could put them on the table, you know.
Yeah.
And so, without me knowing, I learned years later, because I lived in Barlow quite a while. But the kids that I run with, their mothers and fathers had evidently asked them, said, "Where's Dusty's mother?" And he said, "Well, he ain't got one." And they said, "Well, where's his daddy?" I said, "Well, he's off working somewhere. He just comes in once a month, pays bills." Well, that was what, from one family to the next, when they talked on the phone of the evening about the mamas did about their kids and where they at, because everybody was in everybody's yard back then. They all knew it. So it was a very common thing for one of the boys to come over in the afternoon and said, "Mom said, clean up and come over, it's time for supper." And I would get usually 2 to 3 good hot meals a week. And the area people just kind of pitched in to take care of me. And I didn't realize that till I got grown.
Was that in Barlow?
In Barlow, yes, sir.
Ballard County people are pretty good in that way.
They are, and they just kind of took me under the wing, you know. And when I went to work one winter for Fort Ray Dooley out here at Oscar, he had the fin and feather. I was helping clean ducks and geese. Well, a man that lives right behind you, over here across your field, his name was Walt Kinsey. And Walt Kinsey took a liking to me, and he was a real older gentleman. And when springtime would come, of course, he knew my situation like everybody else did. He would come get me, and he said, "Now get you a suitcase and let's go." I said, "All right," and I'd go with him, and I'd work on his farm. And him and his wife, they fed me, they washed my clothes, took care of me. My dad would come back, and I wouldn't be there. Well, he'd go looking around for my aunts and uncles, trying to, "Well, do you know where Dusty is?" So, well, if he ain't here, the only person we know in Ballard County that would come and get him would be Walt Kinsey. And Dad would drive all the way over here behind your house, and he'd find me. He'd visit with me for about 15, 20 minutes out in the front yard and talk and ask me if I needed any money. And I said, "No, I've got money." He said, "Okay, I'll see you about this time next month." And that was the way I grew up.
You had learned to supplement your eating with deer hunting by that time, had you?
Oh, yeah. Well, not really. I really took a liking to that whenever I loved hunting anyway, but I grew up hunting. But when them children started coming on, I had to hunt. There's a little story I can tell you about that. My dad come to my house one Sunday for dinner, him and his new wife, because and we thought the world of her. But they all come for Sunday dinner, and they're sitting down at the kitchen table. We asked the blessing over the food, and my daughter sitting next to him. They always called him D-Daddy, and that little girl said, "D-Daddy," said, "could I have a leg?" And Dad looked at me, and I had fried pork chops. I had made sure everybody had a real nice pork chop for supper. And he looked at me and he said, "Dusty, don't you ever feed these kids anything besides squirrels and rabbits?" I just said, "Well, I guess not." So she just knew that what that meat was on the plate there was a squirrel leg or a rabbit leg.
Should have had a leg along with it.
Yeah. Could I have a leg?
All right. Listen, could I talk you into doing a little picking before we call this over?
Yes, sir. I'll try.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming out here. We're going to close our talking right now, and I'm going to let you connect to the machine back here and pick a little.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
And that's today's view as seen from Joe's Place in Monkey's Eyebrow. Please visit us again next time.